All right, all right, all right. Hey, what's happening? This is Trent. Today we're going to be drawing some Ghost Rider. Most of this video is in real time, but for the sake of convenience, I sped up a couple areas as noted, and mostly I'm just drawing on paper and using some gouache for some whiteout, but mostly just normal traditional materials. So buckle up, let's do it! So what I do is I start out by kind of creating this, this little head space. We want to have an understanding of the volume and shape of what we're drawing. So we start by drawing a kind of a cylinder sort of a thing, and this is all your under drawing. So we've got the neck and the head. This is going to end up being the eye line, and this is of course the middle of the face, the contour of the middle of the face. This is just going to be a headshot, nothing super crazy or fancy. This is kind of how I used to draw Ghost Rider. I had drawn a 6.5 issues for Marvel back in the day. I say half issue because there was this magazine called Wizard Magazine, and they had done a half issue, which was a kind of a common thing that they had done back in the 1990s, and it was sort of like a little origin short story or something like that. And so it was like a sort of an extra, little extra for a character or a popular series, whatever was popular. Ghost Rider was the #1 best-selling comic for all 6 issues that it came out during that time in 2001, between 2000 and 2001. But now nobody remembers the Hammer Lane. I wonder how Devin Grayson's doing these days. It's been a long time. So anyway, she was the author of this series. So then what I would do is I would kind of like, now that I have my form, I have an understanding of like where the eyes sockets would be. I tend to do my Ghost Riders a little different than a lot of other people's Ghost Riders, and I'll kind of show you what I mean. I like to do a little bit more of an elongated head, and I like to get rid of some of my guidelines, and then I kind of wing it. We're gonna do, I like to get a little bit more expressive with my eye shapes and really focus on that upper eyebrow. And I do a negative space for Ghost Rider because, and I'll show you what I mean when I get to the inking, but the reason I do most of the face in black is because I want it to feel very charred and very like very just burned up. Like there might even still be a little bit of flesh. It's pretty gruesome, but that's just what I like. So that means, you know what, I don't like where, this is why we do pencils, ladies and gentlemen, right here, for exactly this reason, because I didn't like how far back into his head that was going. Let's just wing it a little bit more. We know our basic jaw shape, but more important than anything is going to be the readability of it. So that's why I'm not drawing all of the connecting points. I'm only drawing what you need to see to make visual sense of it. And you'll see what I mean. I've drawn this character a few times, so I know what I mean. This would be like the collar of his jacket kind of going around. And I liked to do this thing because it sort of framed his head a little bit. And I'm going to try to keep this around. It's going to be simple because I want to keep it around like a 10-minute, maybe a little bit longer, 10 or 15-minute drawing. This is like something that I would do maybe as a commission at a convention or something like that. And I always used to do these really coiling kind of flames licking off of his head, that sort of a thing. We'll see how it turns out. All right, so that's enough of a sketch for us to start to build off of. Oh, don't forget his shoulder spikes, man, because he's a badass biker dude. Right on. Yeah. So this maybe doesn't make sense to you. This sketch maybe doesn't make sense yet, but we'll we'll have it. It'll make sense by the time we get to the end of it. So this is what I mean when I say I like to kind of go all in, paint his face sort of black with like the, as if it's charred. And then you kind of fill in the negative space in between. So I start with the bigger areas of what will be, I guess, black. I'm gonna keep a little bit of the loose, messy brush stuff just because it's kind of cool. When you start to do something like this, you realize like that you can imply a lot with negative space. And the viewer's eye will sort of fill in the blanks a little bit. I did do some studies of skulls, but ultimately it boiled down to a little bit of a stylization. I was asked during this series, like, hey, could you maybe draw a little bit more realistically? And I was like, not really, no. And I think that's why I struggled with it. I tried to go a little bit more realistic with it when I was doing the series, but it ended up kind of just looking unnatural, like it was not my element, not my comfort zone at all. So I think it ended up hurting the look, because by the end, it wasn't it started out as one of my favorite projects. You know, I had a lot of time, and then time got tight towards the end because we didn't really have any deadlines. There were never any deadlines established. It was just sort of like, well, we'll go with it as it goes. I think the plan was to keep going if it had done like well, but I don't know why it stopped, actually. Comics are a weird thing. It's like you kind of have to keep an ongoing series going if you want to do them. You can't really just like dip into, hey, I'll do a comic for a little while, and just because I think there's so much awesome content coming out all the time, it's tough to keep up with it and keep on top of it, because there's also some amazing artists out there that are always entering into that arena at all times. So you can see here where if it starts to look like you can't tell what's going on, I just fill in something to be more solid so that we can get readability. Because readability is going to be more important than anything else. And then I don't want to like fully render this back of his head here, because I want it to feel like it's so ignited. And there's some little pieces of like hair that have been singed. And I think it's the messier the better with something like this. So if we can get these little sketches, like, yeah, just messy little what's-its. So it looks like chunks of bone are burning off and falling all over the place. Yay. All right, and then that's most of the head, and then we'll cruise down here. What's kind of neat about this design, it works pretty well in black and white because there's a lot of negative space surrounding, like framing his head. I'll show you what I mean when we get closer to the end here. But because there's a lot of white space around his head, and then you've got like this black, it gives it a much clearer like a framing, so it looks like more attention should be given to the area of solid black. So that's why we have, that's why I feel like this sort of negative space kind of a style or process works really well for this character. And this part isn't as important over here, so we're really just going to like black it in entirely. We just need the silhouette for it. Make sure that we got enough light here. This is kind of a new camera rig setup that I'm trying, so we'll see how it goes. So I'm keeping in mind like where a lot of my light is. And while I don't have to be perfectly accurate because readability is more important than accuracy in light, making sure that there's enough of an implication. I used to kind of do this sort of a thing where you have to be careful to not get the ink, by the way, on there, because if it's still wet, it'll smudge. But a lot of times what I would do is sort of like this, I would kind of create some action lines subtly that point your attention toward the head a little bit more. And this is literally like the same way that I used to do it back in the day. Although when I did the comic, it was inked by Danny Miki, who's an all-around awesome dude, a great fellow, and a hard-working man that I learned a lot from. But he inks, I think, very differently. See, I love this kind of stuff where you get like the very loose brush stroke. I'm trying to embrace that a little bit more here. More of the loose brush stroke stuff. I'd like to do some more kind of dynamic posed characters and things like that, but as I'm just getting comfortable with it, I think this is actually good for me to comment on, because I would say that if you are very comfortable with doing like a cartoony face or something like that, the most important thing when you're picking up a new medium is to develop some confidence in it as quickly as you can, so that you can begin to explore in a safe place. A place where you feel like, oh, this is going to turn out okay. You know, it may not be my best piece ever. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself, you know. Like basically just try to take it easy, have fun with it, and build up some confidence with it. Improve yourself with every piece. If you make a mistake, just go, oh, okay, that's fine. I learned something. So the next time I'll do it a little bit differently, and I will have improved. But you can't keep going back and reworking. That's something I've been, I think the psychology of digital art sometimes teaches us to keep going back and undoing our mistakes. But as humans and as artists and as people who are always growing, I think it's more effective and more beneficial to finish something and within the time frame and budget of time and energy that you have allotted for it. And then you can move on from it. You're always growing and you're always moving forward so that the next piece will get done. Otherwise, you end up just kind of sitting and rotting on the vine, so to speak, never feeling quite like you're good enough. And then but I think people like to see the process of seeing an artist grow too. So even if your artwork isn't as good as some of the guys that you admire in a new field or in a new medium, I think that's okay to still post it with some pride and feel like, you know what, I'm still growing, and that feedback is going to help me on my next piece. That's why I even if I wrote a novel and it wasn't a particularly good novel, and in fact it caught a lot of criticism, but I'm proud of it because and I would never undo that or take that back, because it's part of the growing process. It's my the failures and mistakes of a previous work are the foundation of the final product and the better work that comes along later. So I'm just kind of adding some hatching and things here to kind of turn some forms and add a little bit of general detail to it. When we look back at it, well, we don't want to start erasing just yet because I don't want to smudge any of the ink. I'm going to rotate the page a little bit so that I can kind of get in here and start doing some of the the flames. And the flames are really kind of where I used to put a lot of my time. Oh boy. Oh man. But just because I like to add so much detail to them and like curve them around, and we'll see how this one turns out. There's a little bit of a trap that happens. Sometimes you get like these little coils going, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, where's that coil going to lead to? And then you want to keep a good flow going, because a big part of flames is the kind of flow that you get with them. And you kind of begin to just develop some personal solutions on, how do I say it? You develop art habits. The longer you do it, you start to go, oh, I've run into this problem before. And then you kind of find that you can pull out of a nosedive by using that good old trusty habit or solution that's worked a couple of times on a similar problem in the past. And I'm referring to saving some of your shape solutions and things like that. And if you've been drawing for a while, you'll know what I mean, because sometimes like artists will have a hard time with hands or faces or something like that. And then you start, if you just tackle the things that you might not be comfortable with, eventually you start to build all these tools that allow you to find easier solutions, and then you can fall back on those. But it's always good to go back and reevaluate your tools and go, is there a more efficient way that I could do that, or a better way, or am I just using it as a crutch, or is it helping me to grow? I try to do and I've talked about this before, but I try to do a balance of about 80% what I'm comfortable with and that I know I can do pretty confidently, and then about 20 to 25% of what I know I'm going to struggle with a little bit in every single piece that I do, so that I'm always growing by about 20%, 25%, but I'm also always performing in each piece. So like the things that I know are working pretty well here are like, this is kind of why I did it in the style that I'd done this character before, because I already knew these certain stylistic things that were going to work, like the negative space on the head, the framing, the kind of like coiling flames and that sort of a thing. These are kind of my crutches. The things that I'm uncomfortable with, my 20% that I'm uncomfortable with and not confident about in this one, is my ability to handle the brush tool, because this is it feels foreign to me since I'm so used to using a Wacom digital pen on a tablet using Photoshop or Sketchbook Pro or something. And I'm gonna go a little bit crazy with the detail here for a couple of minutes, and then we'll time lapse it. And while I do that, because it's just going to be me adding some interesting details and noise to like make the flames seem kind of cool. All right, then what we want to do is, I think most of the ink is drying through most of this area, so we're going to go in with a nice fat eraser. This is just a generic eraser number 350. Generic block eraser. And most of our forms are holding together. It's still pretty clear even without the sketch lines, so mission accomplished in that regard. We're going to add in the signature here. This is a signature that I've had since I was 13 years old. And you can tell because it looks like it's been scribbled by a 13-year-old. And that's okay. We're comfortable with our 13-year-old artist self geeking out. Then I'm going to add in like a couple of scribbles and doodads and other little details and add more energy coming from the head, that sort of a thing. Just whatever kind of stands out to me as like, maybe it needs a little bit more energy. I want it to feel like his head is exploding with energy, So one of the things that I do is sometimes what I'll do is I'll take gouache, which is like, I'll just use like a cheapy Winsor & Newton gouache, and I found gouache is pretty good for specifically for white, and we'll just white out some of the some of the parts here that will make good negative space and amplify the skull portion. This will also give us a little bit more energy in our piece. There are a few things. This is me doing the undo, but it actually isn't really an undo because you've got the white paint itself, which actually adds a little bit of like a cool noise to it and overall interesting organic painted look to things. It actually makes it, in my opinion, it sort of makes it look really unique. Suppose I could use like a whiteout or something, but this just happens to be. I found gouache is really malleable. It's very, it's something that you can add or take away things pretty easily with. Sometimes I'll even paint with the gray, or I'll make like a gray gouache. There are a few key things here that I want to get a little less attention on, specifically like his jaw here. Just seemed like it was sticking out a little too much. I'm turning this into a gouache painting slowly. And the nice thing about it is you can, with gouache, you can paint over it afterwards. And you don't want to get too meticulous. Just keep it loose. I've used like acrylics as well in the past, but I found that gouache has a nice opacity to it. It's solid, and it'll cover up the black pretty well. So one of the last things I've done is I've gone in and kind of filled in a lot of the areas that could be more solid black, because I want to make sure that I'm getting a good read on everything, and large black areas are going to grab a little bit more of attention and stand out as large shapes in your piece, more than like the tiny little detail things. The detail things are nice to offset the large solid shape areas, but ultimately your eye is going to go to larger flat solid areas. And that's pretty much it. That kind of wraps this piece up, as I think it was about maybe 20 minutes. So that wraps up the Ghost Rider drawing on paper that I wanted to do. It turned out okay. I would like to add a little bit more energy. I think maybe get a little bit more painterly with it in the future. But I'm going to make this one available if you want to own a piece of history. You can pick that up over on my Gumroad channel. If you have ideas for future sketches that you'd like to see me do, please leave those in the comments section below. If you're interested in more of my digital art tutorials or picking up any of my digital art brushes and things like that, I, of course, have those available over on my Gumroad channel, as well as some digital art brushes and things like that. And of course, if you like the freebie stuff, that's cool too. Just don't forget to subscribe and come back. I post probably about once or twice every week at minimum, with a lot of product reviews and digital art tools as well. And until next time, dudes, I'll catch y'all mañana. Ciao, baby. Yeah.